Okay, so we're on part 2 of Korah and Korah's rebellion. We're in number 16. We already looked at the genealogy of Korah, and Moses and Aaron found out that they were first cousins. It's like your first cousin coming up and saying, hey, who made you leader? I'm leader. I've got these 49 men with me, 249 men with 250 total, and we're going to take the leadership from you. And everyone's holy, not just you, just like the church today. They think everyone is on the same playing field in terms of holiness, and they're not. They're not. You say, what are you, Catholic? I'm Christian. Don't you believe in sola scriptura? Don't you believe that this is the God-breathed testimony of God? Because if you do, then you will be like me, and you will submit to what it says, and stop trying to superimpose on it the doctrines of men that you learn in the church. Things that are not said in the Bible. You twist and contort what's there to try to make it agree with what you come to the Bible thinking. We're not doing that. We're taking what it says at face value. So we left off with Moses calling Dathan and Abiram, and they said, we will not come up. And they said, is it a small thing that you've brought us up out of the land flowing with milk and honey to kill us in the wilderness, that you should keep acting like a prince over us? They're talking about Egypt like it was some sort of comfortable place when they were slaves there, being punished and tormented. Moreover, you have not brought us into a land flowing with milk and honey, nor given us inheritance of fields and vineyards. Will you put out the eyes of these men? We will not come up. So again, their stubborn rebellion in their heart worked through the words, foaming it up until they just said, we will not come up. Again, second time. First time Moses fell on his face. Remember? Then Moses, verse 15, was very angry. You think it's wrong for a leader to be angry with you? It depends on what you're doing. You think it's wrong for a leader to be angry with men who are trying to commit sedition? It's God's authority. It's God's leadership that is put on you. I'm nothing. I am nothing. I keep saying it. I'm nothing. What God has done in my life is what God has done. If I didn't have God, I would be in some observatory somewhere, eating my Doritos and drinking my Pepsi, which I don't do anymore, but I did when I was in the observatory, and listening to the Eagles all night long, doing all of my work in the observatory for the world. That's what I would be doing today. Sitting in my office, creating imaginations and fantasies about what the universe is like and what objects are there, and trying to match that with the observations and all of this kind of stuff. If it weren't for the Lord, that's who I would be. Because that's who I started as when the Lord came and called me through the gospel. Moses was very angry. So me being a leader and having the authority of God on me is not from my doing. I never presumed that. When I talk about my credentials, if you hear my story that I've told about my biography, you'll hear God working each and every step of the way. The credit all goes to him, and it really literally goes to him, because he really literally did these things in my life and took me these directions. It wasn't just I chose to do this and then I, gave God the credit for it. No, absolutely not. There were concrete things that he did and said that took me that direction and this direction until I'm here now with these credentials in this place doing this work of the Lord. It's not just some sort of story about some man who made certain decisions and then said God did it. That's not how it works. Then Moses was very angry. And he wasn't angry because they came against him. They were angry because they came against God's anointed one. Then Moses was very angry and said to the Lord. He didn't speak back to them. He spoke to the Lord. Do not respect their offering. Whoa. That's like saying, Lord, don't forgive them of that sin. Then Moses was very angry and said to the Lord, do not respect their offering. I have not taken one donkey from them, nor have I hurt one of them. What do you hear me saying all the time? I've never taken a dime for ministry, ever. Again, Moses is referencing that which Peter also restates in 2 Peter 2:3. If you read the King James or the Greek, the other modern Englishes say exploit, but those say merchandise. The false teachers merchandise you. They try to get your donkey. They try to get some sort of payment from you, some sort of money from you, whether it's a donation from Patreon, buy their merch, buy the coffee in the foyer, put the tithe in so he can get his salary. Moses says, I didn't take a single donkey from them, and I didn't hurt a single one of them. I didn't do any harm to them. There was no harm done to them that they could have a right of vindication. I did not take a single donkey from them that they have a right of vindication. I have not taken one donkey from them, nor have I hurt one of them. And Moses said to Korah, so that was what he said to the Lord. He said to Korah, tomorrow you and all your company be present before the Lord, you and they as well as Aaron. It's a standoff. You 250 men show up tomorrow with your censers, with incense and fire. You'll stand there. Aaron will stand here. Because it's about the priesthood. So he supposed. Let each take his censer and put incense in it, and each of you bring his censer before the Lord, 250 censers, both you and Aaron, each with his censer. It's a standoff. Reminds you of Elijah and the priests of Baal, which hasn't happened yet. This is long before that. So every man took his censer, put fire in it, laid incense on it, and stood at the door of the tabernacle of meeting with Moses and Aaron. So we're on the next day already. This is verse 18. And Korah gathered all the congregation against them at the door of the tabernacle of meeting. So it's not just the 250 men now. Korah gathered the congregation. Gathered all the congregation against them at the door of the tabernacle. So you have the entire congregation outside of the door of the tabernacle, and here are the 250 men with their censers, and Aaron with his censers, and Moses. Then the glory of the Lord appeared to all the congregation. And the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, so that's out loud, saying, separate yourselves from among this congregation, that I may consume them in a moment. Consume means to burn them up, to destroy them, do something to them to kill them. And the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, separate yourselves from among the congregation, that I may consume them in a moment. Then they fell on their faces and said, O God, the God of spirits of all flesh. Interesting phrase. The God of the spirits of all flesh, Shall one man sin, and you be angry with all the congregation? But God saw their hearts. God saw their hearts. So the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the congregation, saying, get away from the tents of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. Then Moses rose and went to Dathan and Abiram, and the elders of Israel followed him. So 250 men followed him. And he spoke to the congregation, saying, depart now from the tents of these wicked men. So he passes a judgment on them, calling them wicked men. Depart now from the tents of these wicked men. Touch nothing of theirs, lest you be consumed in all their sins. This is a principle that you even see in Jude, that sin can pass from an object to you. If an object has been corrupted by sin, it can pass to you. Hating even the clothing corrupted by sinful flesh. Jude. So they got away from around the tents of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram, verse 27. And Dathan and Abiram came out and stood at the door of their tents with their wives, their sons, and their little children. And Moses said, by this you shall know that the Lord has sent me to do all these works, for I have not done them of my own will. And any true leader of the Lord has this same biography to tell. That if they had been left to their own will and intentions, they would have been something else. I would never have gone into business to support myself, because for me, business was the most boring and irrelevant thing. I sought truth and knowledge. That is what I sought, and that's why I went into astrophysics. The reason why I became a Christian was because of the preaching of a gospel preacher in the church where I was saved. But even before that, I realized that astrophysics did not have the answers to life's questions. And so I left it. He says, I've not done these of my own will, and you will know. By this you shall know that the Lord has sent me to do all these works, for I have not done them of my own will. Now notice how I teach you and preach to you. I'm not teaching and preaching to you, screaming and yelling at you, and shaking my finger at you, although I could, and I would be right, for those of you who are in error and heresy and sedition. And those of you who are obeying Jesus and proving your love for Jesus by obeying his commandments and are preparing for that home of righteousness and looking forward to it, I have nothing bad to say to you, but just encouragement and love and saying thank you for loving Jesus. But for those of you who are in error, I could be screaming and yelling at you and shaking my finger, and I would not be in the wrong, because you need that. It says, if these men die naturally like all men, or if they are visited by the common fate of all men, then the Lord has not sent me. If they die like just any other men, then the Lord hasn't sent me. But if the Lord creates a new thing, and the earth, now he's going to name it, and the earth opens its mouth and swallows them up with all that belongs to them, and they go down alive into the pit, then you will understand that these men have rejected the Lord. Notice how these men's relationship to the leader who was prepared and called and commissioned by God is their relationship to God. They rejected Moses' leadership, and Moses says that they rejected the Lord. Well, of course, if that leader has God's authority in his position and you reject him, you're rejecting the Lord, not the man. For whatever reason, even if you don't like something about the man and that's causing you to reject him, you're really rejecting the Lord. You're rejecting the Lord. You don't like that I'm bald? One guy didn't. Really, one guy didn't like it. He was so angry with me that I was bald. Yep. And so he started trying to create sedition on the channel, really. And I warned him, and then I just had to ban him. He didn't like that I was bald, and so he rejected me. And in rejecting me, he also rejected the Lord. But then I found out that it wasn't that I was bald. He was just choosing that as something to criticize me about because he couldn't find anything to criticize me about. He was opposing the gospel of Jesus. He believed we weren't saved by faith alone, but he rejected other things in the gospel. So he was rejecting the Lord, and he was using me as a conduit for rejecting the Lord. It's the truth. That's how it works, and that's what he's saying right here. But if the Lord creates a new thing, and the earth opens its mouth and swallows them up with all their belongings, all that belongs to them, and they go down alive into the pit, then you will understand that these men have rejected the Lord. Now it came to pass, as he finished speaking all these words, immediately, that the ground split apart under them. You tell me that wouldn't terrify you. And the earth opened its mouth and swallowed them up with their households and all the men with Korah with all their goods. So they and all those with them went down alive into the pit. The earth closed over them, and they perished from among the assembly. The word Korah means bald. And he's called Korah because of the bald spot left among the Israelites due to him. Then all Israel who were around them fled at their cry, for they said, lest the earth swallow us up also. They heard them screaming, and the rest of the Israelites fled because they said, lest the earth swallow us up also. And a fire came out from the Lord and consumed the 250 men who were offering incense at that moment. A fire came out from the Lord, the cloud, and consumed the 250 men who were offering incense. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, tell Eleazar, the son of Aaron, the priest, to pick up the censers out of the blaze, for they are holy, and scatter the fire some distance away. The censers of these men who sinned against their own souls, let them be made into hammered plates as a covering for the altar, because they presented them before the Lord. Therefore they are holy, and they shall be a sign to the children of Israel. Notice these 250 men sinned against their own souls. They transgressed against their own souls. Well, we know that because they were consumed by fire from God directly. The censers were holy, but the men were not. The censers were recovered from the fire that was ablaze from the Lord that destroyed all of them, and hammered into plates and put on the altar as a remembrance to the children of Israel of Korah's rebellion. So Eleazar, the priest, took the bronze censers which those who were burned up had presented, and they were hammered out as a covering on the altar, to be a memorial to the children of Israel that no outsider who is not a descendant of Aaron should come near to offer incense before the Lord, that he might not become like Korah and his companions, just as the Lord had said to him through Moses. On the next day, all the congregation of the children of Israel complained against Moses and Aaron, saying, "You have killed the people of the Lord." Whoa. Talking about having been brainwashed by Korah and his men. As if it wasn't enough that God opened the earth and swallowed everything they owned and all of their people in their families and who belonged to them, and closed up over them. And all the congregation saw it and heard their cries and fled because of it. And they saw the fire come down out from the cloud and consume the 250 men who were opposing Moses and Aaron. They saw them take the censers and hammer them into plates and put them on the altar. On the next day, the congregation of the children of Israel complained against Moses and Aaron, saying, "You have killed the people of the Lord." They're still treating it as if everyone is holy, when clearly not everyone was holy. Korah had not stopped sinning. Those 250 men had not stopped sinning. They'd sinned against their own soul, in fact, by doing this. Now it happened when the congregation had gathered against Moses and Aaron, so here's the second standoff, that they turned toward the tabernacle of meeting, and suddenly the cloud covered it, and the glory of the Lord appeared. I would run if I were them. I would fall on my face and repent if I were them. I would do something. Then Moses and Aaron came before the tabernacle of meeting. This is the creepy part. This is really, really, really creepy. Makes the last part seem like a birthday party. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Get away from among this congregation, that I may consume them in a moment," like he said earlier. He was going to do it earlier. Now he's going to do it for sure, because they all came together in rebellion against the leader that God had put in place, all of them. And they fell on their faces, Moses and Aaron. So Moses said to Aaron, "Take a censer and put fire in it from the altar, put incense on it, and take it quickly to the congregation and make atonement for them. For wrath has gone out from the Lord. The plague has begun." He's not predicting. He's saying that wrath has gone out from the Lord and the plague has begun. Plague. Then Aaron took it as Moses commanded and ran into the midst of the assembly, and already the plague had begun among the people. Already people were being afflicted with a plague, boils on their skin melting off maybe. We don't know what the plague was like, but it was clearly visible. And the pain and suffering was clearly audible. And already the plague had begun among the people, so he put in the incense and made atonement for the people. And he stood between the dead and the living. All these dead bodies that have visible signs of the plague, boils probably, dead. And the living here being afflicted with it already, and he's standing between them with this censer with incense to make atonement. And he stood between the dead and the living. So the plague was stopped. Now those who died in the plague, you ready for the number, the tally of the dead for opposing Moses that very day that they died? 1,400. No, more. 14,000 people and 700. Besides those who died in the Korah incident. It says here, besides those who died in the Korah incident. So Aaron returned to Moses at the door of the tabernacle of meeting, for the plague had stopped. 14,700 people died in the plague that quickly. That was a fast plague. That may be the fastest plague in history on record. Moses and Aaron had fallen on their face, and Moses said, go make this censer because the plague has already left. It's ready, it's going, it's beginning. By the time he gets the censer, he gets the incense and the fire, and he gets out there, already most of those people were dead. Some more surely died as he was putting the fire and the incense and everything to stand between the dead and the living to stop the plague. Are you sure you want to go the way of Korah's rebellion? Are you sure that you want to stand against God's leaders, His chosen ones, the ones who have been made holy in His sight? Are you sure? Jude says they've been destroyed. The false teachers are those who've been destroyed in Korah's rebellion. You sure you want to go that way? For those of you who are faithful to Jesus Christ, to listen carefully with your ears, to read carefully what you see that Jesus taught, and to love Him in your obedience of His commandments. May the Lord bless you as you seek Him with all your heart.